Hi everybody, this is Anna, and I'm here to share with you why it's true that what you don't see is hurting you. So human beings, all of us have 4 energy fields. We have a physical energy field, which involves the body and extends just a bit beyond the body. Larger than that, we have a mental energy field. Then larger than that is an emotional energy field. And finally, our largest field is our spiritual energy field, which encapsulates all the others. Which means when something happens to us, it always happens to us first on a spiritual level. So if we are wounded, if we are hurt, if we are violated in some way, we experience it first on the outer spiritual level, and then it translates inward to all the other levels. So this is how that might happen. Let's say you're a child who was raised in a household that experiences poverty. Scarcity is a spiritual misalignment. So it's experienced on the spiritual level as misalignment. Now, the experience of spiritual misalignment is kind of subtle, which means unless you're really paying attention and know how to clue into your spiritual energy, you may not know it happened. But what happens after the misalignment occurs on the spiritual level is it translates in, and then it affects the emotional level. And that's when you might experience fear or anger or depression. Then it translates further down into the mental level, and that's where you develop a sense of understanding about what's happening. Maybe you come up with belief systems or a story that seems to explain what's happening. So let's say from an experience of poverty, you come up with the belief that there's never really enough and you can work really hard, but you'll always be poor, and people who are rich are really bad guys because somehow they've stolen their wealth from others. So that would maybe be a story that happens on the mental level. Then that translates down into the physical level, and that's when you start experiencing chronic physical struggles. And that might be pain like fibromyalgia or migraines or backaches, or it could be other signs of imbalance like your digestion always seems to be off, or you can't sleep at night, or you're feeling exhausted. So because the physical energy field we have is the densest field, it's the easiest for us to notice. So if you've missed all the other signs happening, by the time it gets to your body, it's very clear to you something is off. And because we're experiencing it in the body, we usually try to address it, at least at first, from the body. So you may go to the doctor and get medicine, or you may change your diet, change your exercise, in some other way try to rebalance your body. Now, you might also know that you've got these limiting beliefs that are sort of all scarcity beliefs, and you may decide you don't want that either. So you're going to try to replace those beliefs with beliefs about prosperity and abundance, and you do visualizations to try to get that in there. You might try to use the law of attraction, for example, to change that belief system. And you might also realize you're having some emotional struggles on that energy field. So maybe you try going to a therapist, see if you can talk about your feelings and get this taken care of, or maybe you do some prayer or meditation. So basically you can experience all these symptoms and you can address them on the physical, mental, and emotional energy fields, and you might be able to do some shifting and experience some relief. But remember, what's the initial problem occurs in the spiritual field, which you're not seeing, and until that misalignment is healed, it will constantly translate itself back through again and again and again, which means that no matter what you do, the problems never go away for long. They never stay gone for long. And so this can be really frustrating when you're doing everything you can. You're taking all the steps you know to take, and you're really diligent about your health and your mental health and your emotional health, and still somehow you're not able to achieve balance. So at some point you realize this isn't quite working and you have 2 options. One option is you can just understand that this is part of your life. This imbalance, this discomfort, this pain is something you have to live with, and you're just going to have to strategize around it and do the best you can to cope with it. That's one option. The other option is that you refuse to agree that this is part of your life, or that this imbalance belongs here, and you insist there must be a way for healing. There must be a way to do this that goes beyond what I've already tried. And so you're going beyond what you know into something else. And that is really the step of faith. You're going beyond what you see and believing in what you don't see, but you believe is there. And that is actually the setup into moving into the spiritual realm, where spiritual healing is available. Now, once you access the spiritual field, healing is really very simple. It's very easy, it's quick, it's effortless, and it's immediate, and it's permanent. Once you've cleared that misalignment, it affects all the other fields. It's really miraculous. That's what it is. So the challenge isn't once you get to the spiritual field for healing, it is getting you there. Now, on the physical level and the emotional level, all those fields seem to flow really easily to the spiritual healing. Where we get stuck is the mental field, where we've got our stories and our beliefs and we're making meaning of things. That is where we get stuck, and that is probably the obstacle we have to work with the most in order to experience true and complete and lasting healing. So in my next segment, I'm going to talk more about how the mind gets in the way of our spiritual healing and what we can do about it. The next segment is called The Mind Field is a Minefield. So I hope you'll join me for that one. Thanks.